I'm Mark Muncy, the author of Eerie, Florida and Freaky Florida. For nearly 30 years, I've collected myths, monsters, legends, and more ghost stories than you can imagine. Join me as we journey to some of the spookiest and craziest places on Earth that might just be in your own backyard. Welcome to Eerie Travels.
Hello, travelers. We are here today to talk about a wonderful group of legendary ladies for Women's History Month. And these ladies are infamous in Appalachian folklore, or maybe just famous, but I think you're going to enjoy their stories. These are true tales that have inspired folklore legends, but then twist back to the truth. So those are always my favorite stories. I always go looking for ghost stories. I always go looking for legends. And then when they find out being true, it's even better. So if you'll join me today, we're going to talk about two ladies, both from the Kentucky, West Virginia area, who lived their lives all up and down the Appalachian mountain range. Well, the first one. The second one sadly lived a short life, but her legend has grown beyond and beyond anything you can imagine. And then for our travel stop for the day, we're going to go to a fun location that I think you're all going to really enjoy. So without further ado, I think we are going to talk right now about a legend that was told to me by the great-granddaughter of the lady in question, and she is known as Aunt Jenny. Sometimes she's referred to as Aunt Jane in some folklore, and in other times she's known as Screamin' Jenny. But the Jenny that we know was named Louisa Jane, and this is her, and she was half Cherokee, was noted to be an amazing beauty with blue eyes that sparkled like wildfire. She lived to be 98 years old, so there she is, as a nice old lady. Well, her story begins when she was 14, and she was married to Willis Brooks. Now, Willis Brooks and his son already had a kid. They married, and they were very happy together. He was 34, and she was 16. And they wound up having 9 children together that lived to adulthood. They actually had 10, but one died in childbirth. But Jane and her husband were very, very happy. They were married in Kentucky, and then they bought some land in the Alabama forest. And at this point, this was just before the Civil War. Now, they were very happy together with all their kids. They had 140 acres of land, and they built an inn on the land. Now, when the Civil War broke out, Civil War in that area of Alabama was not particularly, it was not particularly a war for the people. The people in this part of Alabama didn't really care too much for the war. They felt it was a rich man's war and a poor man's fight. This was exacerbated by the fact that rich people were able to spend $300 to have someone fight in their stead, a sum the young people of that time would have the poor families would have no way of getting. Also, if your family owned more than 30 slaves, you didn't have to send any of your boys to fight during the draft. When that occurred, even more resistance to the Southern cause was brewing in this area. Well, Louisa Elizabeth Jane Bates Brooks, at this point, was on the land with her husband, and depending on the version of this story, you get the story that either A, they were Northern sympathizers, or B, there was a battle nearby, and when the folks were dead in their yard, they buried them, whether they were Union or Southern. Either way, Southern feelings toward them were not very good. So what happened was, there was an area of this time, there was a little faction called the Confederate Guard. Now what the Confederate Guard were basically men who were too old to fight or just inept at fighting, and they would be keeping the peace at home. And they would be tax collectors, but they would also be press gangs for the people avoiding the draft. And they eventually came to the Brooks homestead. And old man Brooks, Willis Brooks, said, I'm too old to fight. You can't send me off. I'm like, well, we'll take your son. Well, he's too young to fight. You can't send him. He's not 18 yet. Well, all men are going. You got to send you or him. Well, he resisted, so the Confederate Guard decided to string him up. They dragged him out. Now, his oldest son at this point grabs a gun to save his father, and he runs out to shoot the men. And of course, the men gun down the son. When the father starts screaming and fighting, they gun him down as well, all in front of the other children and Louisa Jane. Now, when they leave, Louisa Jane goes to her children. And being half Cherokee, she grabs them all and makes them go to the bodies of her son and her husband and makes them swear a blood oath that there would be vengeance for these lost men. The family goes for decades, becoming some of the most notorious gangsters and also some of the most famous lawmen in the West. She spends her life teaching her boys how to fight and how to become gunmen. She famously said, I wasted many a barrel of gunpowder teaching my boys how to do the right thing. Well, these men hired themselves out to gangs and other things. A couple of them did become lawmen, and they all were searching for those Confederate Guard. Jane herself, now called herself Aunt Jenny, she went with them and helped them find the first of the Confederate Guard, which was not far from her home. She dealt the killing blow herself. Her boys would now go over several states looking for the other men, and it would take decades for them all to come to justice, but one. So all 7 men were killed over the next 50 years. All of her sons passed away before she did. So she lived to 98. And when her last son died in a massive gunfight with 6 men, that he was a sheriff and he was searching for a gang, he wound up taking out all 6 before finally being shot in the back with a shotgun himself. And when he passed away, she famously was quoted as saying, well, all my boys died with their boots on. And there is Willis Brooks, her oldest son, her oldest surviving son, as he went out in a blaze of glory shortly after that. Now, Willis himself had a son who also went on to become a famous lawman and also helped gun down the next to last member of the Confederate Guard. Now, Jenny lived this long, long life, and she was consumed by vengeance. Now, she remarried to another man, Willis Brooks, his dad, and then she wound up having another 10 children with that family. So the lady gave birth to 20 kids, so more power to her. And the fact that she still lived to 98 was, quite an achievement, especially back then, especially during the Civil War and the post-Civil War era. My goodness. But anyway, all of that with Jenny is an amazing story. The end of her life is what brings her into folklore history. The families had all these feuds, the families had all the gang life, the lawmen, and she was tired. At the end of her life, she was at her deathbed, and she asked her family priest to bring her this soap dish that she had hand-carved out of Indian tradition. and it was from her early days, and she wanted to wash away her sins as she laid down for rest. And the priest carries the bowl and brings it to her, and she dips her hands in the water in the soap dish and washes herself and says, "Now I'm at peace." And then she passes away. And the priest carries the soap dish back to the shelf where he'd gotten it, and he notices it's an unusual shape. And he looks a little closer at it, and he realizes that Jenny had made the soap dish out of the skull of the first man she killed of that Confederate Guard. She was washing away her sins, but she was still seeking vengeance. Now, the last man who got away, no one knows what happened to him. But Jenny supposedly haunts the Appalachian hills, still looking for descendants of that last man, and that is why she is called Screaming Jenny now. Her ghost appears with those pale blue eyes, and she hunts for the man that killed her husband and her oldest son to this day. Terrifying tale in some parts, but the fact that she was real, the fact that we have her records, and the fact that her great-granddaughter to this day still respects her and told me this wonderful tale, I thought it'd be most appropriate to share with you all. So from Kentucky to Alabama, we now go back up to West Virginia. And we're going to talk about our second lady this evening. Her name was Zona Hester Shue. Now, this young lady also married very young to a man named Esther. And this man, Erasmus Hester Shue, and her were reportedly very happy. And a young boy one day came home and heard some noise over at the Shue residence. So he went over there and found poor Zona lying there dead on the floor. Just tragedy. He ran into town to get the husband, also to get the doctor to see if there was anything to be done for the poor lady. By the time they got there, she was long dead. And they didn't know the poor thing, what had happened to her. The doctor, the husband was so in grief. There's Erasmus. So in grief, he just held her and would not let go of her head. He was so heartbroken over her death. And he takes her to the funeral home where they're doing the autopsy, where they're trying to figure out what's wrong with her, and he's just holding her head so close because he loved her so much and can't believe someone has taken his lovely Zona from him. Well, as the funeral begins, he's still at the head of the coffin, and he's draped her with this beautiful scarf that was her favorite scarf, and he lets no one near the body. She's buried, and shortly after burial, her sister receives a visit from the ghost of Zona. And Zona says, "My husband murdered me. He strangled me. He was terrible with me, and you need to prove his guilt." So she goes to the sheriff and says, "She was strangled." And the sheriff's like, "No, there's no evidence of that. The doctor said she had died of a long faint," which what we would call now a heart attack, but that was what was the official cause of death. But she's insisted that there was a crime, that she had been strangled, that her sister had told her this. Sheriff's like, "Well, I can't dig up the body based on the ghost's evidence." But the doctor says, "Well, her husband did keep me from doing a full autopsy. He wouldn't let go of her head. Maybe I made a mistake." With that little bit, they were able to exhume the body, and they were able to study the body. And then they found the bruising on the neck and the broken vocal cords where she had been strangled. Now, the other clue the ghost had given the sister was the name Trout. It said something about fish or something about trout. Well, sure enough, old Erasmus used to be known as Trout Shue and lived in another city not too far away where he had lost his first wife in a tragic building accident. When they were building a new chimney on their house, he accidentally dropped a rock on her head and she died. And that tragedy had haunted him all his life. Well, apparently not as much, and now we have a second victim. He had a third wife who also died of mysterious circumstances. To be unlucky in love once, shame on you. To be unlucky in love 3 times, that sounds like a serial killer. The body was brought up, and even he fought so hard to keep the body from being exhumed. But then when it was exhumed, he was famously quoted as saying, "Well, you'll never be able to prove I did it anyway." Obviously, he'd never watched any true crime stories. But Erasmus was put to trial, and he was convicted, and he was sent to Moundsville Prison. Now, the people tried to lynch him, but there was interference from the sheriffs, and they were able to put Erasmus away. And now Zona has become quite the folklore hero. She is the only ghost on record as having solved her own murder. This is, an amazing fact. So West Virginia celebrates her. She has a roadside marker that you can visit that tells her story right where the Shue homestead used to be. It's actually a few miles from that location now. It's been moved. But there's where the homestead lands are. The house itself still has a foundation that you can visit. The house has been investigated many times by paranormal experts. And then the Soul Chapel, that's where she's buried. And she now has a new permanent marker there for herself. Her old marker had been stolen numerous times, same as Aunt Jenny's marker had been stolen numerous times. But now they've been put up there and people leave marks and leave trinkets for her, just like they do Aunt Jenny out in Oakdale, Alabama. You can do this here near the town of Smoot, West Virginia. And it is a beautiful location, and you couldn't ask for a better resting place. And now people come for thousands of miles to see both these lovely ladies' grave sites. The grave site for Jenny is deep into the Oak Head State Forest, and you have to drive 4 miles on an old logging trail that's dirt. And now here for the Greenbriar Ghost, thankfully, it's a little better road. It is a nice side holler road. It does have some spectacular views, and it is beautiful to see, and it is a peaceful drive. But Zona Hester, and then Trout, Erasmus, Shue, good riddance to you. You died in Moundsville Prison in 1924. Now, while you're visiting these places, I like to throw in a fun little place to visit on each of these episodes. And this one is probably one of the coolest places you can visit in West Virginia. Now, that's saying a lot because you got the Mothman Museum, which we'll talk about in a future episode. You've got the Flatwoods Monster Museum. We'll talk about that later on down the line. But right here outside of Smoot, maybe 20 minutes from there, in the town of Richmond, West Virginia, you can visit Dave Spinks World of Weird. And I'm going to let you see just a little video there real quick of a little bit of Dave. Okay, so we're here in the heart of West Virginia, right on the Monongalia Forest. And I am walking up to my good buddy, Dave Spinks' wonderful World of Weird. How cool is this? All right, so let's go inside and see what we see.
Win.
And go.
Hey guys, I'm Dave Spinks, owner operator of Dave Spinks World of Weird, along with Serenity Jenny, who has the Synergy Springs Consciousness Expansion Center right here in Richwood, West Virginia. And we are showcasing my books that I've written, some of the things I've done in my 30 plus years of investigating the paranormal, which I investigate all things paranormal, to include UFOs, cryptids, and of course hauntings. I've written numerous books, have many more books in the works now, and you know, this is what I do. And this store was something I've been wanting to do for several years, at least 7-8 years now. And now, thanks to Serenity Jenny, I have the help I need, and we have a dual center here. We have an event center, we have a holistic healing center coming very soon, and the merch store that you see all around you.
Perfect. So when's the grand opening?
Grand opening is March 13th, 2022. Even though we're open now, we did a soft open. We're still getting in merch daily, weekly, all kinds of stuff. It's ever-changing merch, so we'll have some of the stable things in here, like my books and movies and different things I'm in, as well as constantly changing books from many other authors in the paranormal realms. You name it, we got it. I mean, we got real authentic Native American stuff here that's handmade for us, specifically for this store. Many other authors, people that are in the TV world as well, will be here speaking, signing books, the whole 9 yards. We have a whole bunch of stuff coming.
And you're still actively doing investigations?
Of course, always, yes. I always investigating all aspects of it, man. I mean, I get daily reports. This is kind of like my office, my home away from home office. So even when I'm in here working in the store, people are coming in, hey, can you come and check out this? We just had 2 folks in here right now sharing their experiences with us and wanting us to come out there at some point and check out their home property. So, you know, this is kind of a dream come true for me, because it is perfect for what I do, because I do this on a small scale when I'm traveling the country speaking at conferences. Why not expand it to a bigger scale and have everything I want in the store? And people can come in and out as they want, and have other friends of mine that are authors and investigators come in and teach classes and sign books and, you know, give presentations. I mean, it's perfect. So.
And where can they reach you online?
You can reach me online at www.davespinksparanormalinvestigator.com. Also, we have a brand new Facebook page, Dave Spinks World of Weird and Synergy Springs. It's combined because this is a combined store. We also have our own personal Facebook and social media, and we're building all that for the World of Weird and Synergy Springs Consciousness Expansion Center as well. So, like I said, I mean, all kinds of stuff coming. I'm super excited, and we hope that you come down and see us. Look for our upcoming events. We'll be posting those on Facebook pages and everything, you know, telling what days events are and everything like that, so, and who we're having.
All right, well, thanks, Dave, and thanks for welcoming us, and I'm going to look around some more.
Yeah, super glad you came, man. I really appreciate you making the trip over and sharing the store with everyone.
So, special thanks to Dave, and congratulations to Dave, because that store did its grand opening just last week, and they opened with a monster fest with 300 and some odd guests showing up, with guest speakers and hosts, and we're excited. Next year we will definitely be there, and we'll film some footage for you. But that was so thanks to Dave for letting us come in and check out that amazing store well before it opened. And it was in its early days. That old historic building they're in, super spooky, and if anybody's got, you know, is the real deal there, Dave is the one to know. And I had so much fun there. Dave knows his stuff. I mean, he was an ex-cop, as he said, and he's, you know, been doing paranormal investigation as long as I have, and he is actually boots on the ground. He is actually really getting in there and doing the actual stuff, everything from paranormal to UFOs, so very similar to someone else I know. But the items that they've got in that store are super unique, and I was so happy to wander around and look at some of the stuff. It's right up there with the Mothman Museum and the Flatwoods Monster Museum, which are both right, you know, within an hour of this location. But it is well worth a stop on your own trip to Eerie, Appalachia. I cannot recommend it highly enough. And Dave is incredible, and his wonderful lady there. Now, those Paul signs are from the movie Paul, which we love here on Eerie Travels. Those are the real film used screen signs that were used. And it's pretty amazing. And while I was there, I was able to pick up Dave's newest book, Cooking with Cryptids, which with an introduction by Lyle Blackburn and some additional recipes by Joe Perdue of Wild and Weird Radio. And if you haven't heard them, it's a great little podcast to check out. But very happy with this book. Some amazing recipes and some wonderful cryptid art. And you can pick that up at the Dave Spinks World of Weird website. You can also pick it up on any of your other usual book locations that you can find. Now, for future episodes, we are going to be visiting a lot more haunted locations. We're going to be visiting monster legendary sites. We're going to be doing all sorts of travels all over the United States and beyond when we can. For the most part, there's going to be a lot of Eerie, Florida, because that's my home and that's where I'm from. But we will be traveling as much as we can and getting as much footage as we can from these locations. We don't like to talk about places we've never been, but we would love for you all to send us requests of locations you'd like to go to. So please send them to mark@eerieflorida.com, and I'll be happy to take a look at any locations you might like us to talk about that we might do on a future episode. Now, before we go, I'd just like to say a couple things. One, I am not a paranormal investigator. I am not a Bigfoot hunter. I am not a UFO hunter. I want their stories. I go on paranormal investigations with paranormal experts. I go on Bigfoot hunts with Bigfoot experts. I go on UFO investigations with UFO experts. That's my job, is to get their story. When I do talk these legends, when I do talk about these stories, I try to get as close as I can to the original source. For Zona Shue, we were able to pull up the original newspaper articles, and we were able to talk to Dave Spinks, who has investigated the paranormal happenings at the homestead. For Aunt Jenny, I was able to talk to the wonderful descendant of Aunt Jenny herself, her wonderful great-granddaughter. And I'm so thankful for them. Those are all both stories available in our soon-to-be-released book, Eerie Appalachia, coming from History Press, June 20th. And you can find any of my other books available at fine bookstores anywhere, all available from the History Press. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next week. And if not, we'll see you on the other side.